Hi, this is the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
So great to be here on Tough TV with you. Great show coming up. We have Ed Bonekempter. He wrote a book called Why the South Fought the Civil War and Why the North Won. That should be pretty interesting.
Sure will be, because there's been so much on TV in the last few weeks, well, about Abraham Lincoln and all the things that are to do with our flag. So let's talk with him about that today, too.
Also, we'll be hitting the political trail as well with our friends Donald Trump and George W. Bush and the rest of the crew. And, well, not George W. Bush, I should say Jeb Bush. But we'll be hitting the trail with them. And, you know, I get all these Bushes confused is what happens. And, of course, things are starting to heat up, and the money is being spent on a lot of political ads. That and North Korea as well. They are always good for some news. This is the American Roundtable on Tough TV. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel. We'll be right back.
This is the American Roundtable. Welcome back on Tough TV. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
Well, the money is being spent politically. Let's kind of roll down the tally, shall we?
That's right.
Ken, we have Jeb Bush. He is the king of spending. If you think he's just a cost-cutting conservative, well, not according to his balance sheet for money spent on campaign ads, nearly $50 million, and we haven't even gotten to a primary yet.
That's right, and of course he's not in the lead in the polls. Our friend Donald Trump, I think, is still in the lead.
Donald Trump, believe it or not, has spent $1.5 million. So you could say that the Donald is outfoxing Bush as far as money spent, because you want to try to save as much money for your campaign for the later stages as you can, because, you know, things start gearing up. You start having to attack your opponents, which is how you win nowadays. You don't come up with new ideas. You just kind of attack your opponents. And so they need all the money they can get. And if this guy's already blown $50 million on ads, and we're not even in Iowa yet, what does that tell you?
I'll tell you, it's been an interesting study. If you enjoy politics, this election, probably in our lifetime, Al, has been the most interesting to watch.
I will tell you what, it is either a brilliant matching of the finest political minds, or I prefer to recall it more of a clown show. However, it is a very interesting clown show. Some are a little less clowny than others, but who is standing out to you right now? Who are you seeing that's looking anywhere near presidential? Let's just say it that way.
Well, you know, you come back to, well, we're taping this in Florida. Rubio is up there. Of course, Cruz is looking more and more presidential. But
he looks very president.
He does.
He's very spoken in his speech. He's well thought. It looks very good. Who else? What about Krispy Kreme? I mean Christie. How about him?
Christie?
Yes.
Well, New Jersey. That's all I can say about it. He and he likes to tussle with everybody, and you know,
I think what he's trying to do, if you want to know the truth, he's trying to be the alpha male like Trump has been since the beginning of this thing. And so you see him more trying to take on that alpha male role. Bush, of course, is looking more and more like the beta male, which is not you want the big guy to ride in like a cowboy, especially you want a strong leader. So I think that's what Christie's trying to do. I don't know if he's succeeding. We'll have to talk about that. But this is the American Roundtable on Tough TV. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
And we'll see you right back. Hi, welcome back to the American Roundtable on Tough TV. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
We happen to have a man who is a historian, he is an author, he is a teacher. His name is Ed Bonekempter. He's a doctor. Hello, Ed. Welcome to the American Roundtable.
Thanks, Al and Ken.
And it's kind of interesting. We're doing something a little different on today's show. We're talking about history. And, of course, I have a history degree. I love history. I wish we learned more from our history, but you know what? It's all part of the same thing. And I know you're a history fan too, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, of course, particularly as we go into this next year for the election, most of us should be really studying our history.
Ed,
that's absolutely right.
Yes. I want to tell you first, Ed, why don't you get to the heart of, let's start with the heart of the book. Why this book and why now?
Okay. the myth of the lost cause was basically ex-Confederate justification for the Civil War. In essence, it said slavery was a beneficial institution that benefited blacks and whites, that slavery was about to go away anyway, therefore the war was unnecessary. And then the critical part is, what was the cause of the Civil War? And the myth says that it was all about states' rights and not about slavery. Then the myth also says the South never could have won, that Robert E. Lee was one of the greatest generals in history, that James Longstreet, not Robert E. Lee, lost the Battle of Gettysburg, that Grant was a butcher, that he only won by brute force and suicidally attacking with his own men, and that the North won solely by waging total war. Now, what my book does is examine all of these parts of the myth, and I disagree with all of them. And probably the most important issue with relevance today, in light of Confederate flag issues, etc., is why was there secession? Why was there a Confederacy? And that gets to, okay, what does the Confederate battle flag stand for?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Confederate battle flag. Of course, this is in the news quite a bit
Sure.
lately. It is being, I guess it's being made flag non grata, I guess you could say, for reasons that started with the Charleston shooting in a church. Ken, what's your take first off on this?
Well, I was raised in the North, but I've been in the South since I was 16. But in the last, I would say 6 months, I've never seen so many Confederate flags flying down here by Southerners who are just proud to be Southerners. And that's part of that flag. Is that right, Ed?
That's right. As a matter of fact, I even see more flags of the Confederacy flying here in southeastern Pennsylvania than I normally have before. So basically, the good news is people are focusing on the issues and hopefully studying their history. And regardless of what a history tells us, they can also fly the flag for whatever reason they choose. And so part of it may be pride in the Confederacy, pride in ancestors fighting for the Confederacy, a symbol of states' rights. So there are various reasons why it could be going on. On the other hand, there's concern about, is it being flown as a sign of white supremacy? And if so, that does not do a lot of good. Of course, in just seeing a flag, we don't know what the purpose is. But so all my book does is explore, well, why was there secession and why was there Confederacy?
Yes, and we are going to take a quick break, but before we go, let's reiterate that we are talking with Ed Bonekempter. His book is The Myth of the Lost Cause, Why the South Fought the Civil War and Why the North Won. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
This is the American Roundtable on the Tough TV, and we are very appreciative of Tough TV. They're the best network around. We're glad to be on them. We'll have more questions for Ed in just a moment. And Ed, thank you for being on the show with us. This is the American Roundtable.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the American Roundtable on Tough TV. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
Ed Bonekempter is our guest. He wrote a book called The Myth of the Lost Cause, Why the South Fought the Civil War and Why the North Won. Well, why did the South fight the Civil War and why the North win? Let's ask you that question, Ed.
Okay. The South fought the Civil War in its own words because of desire to preserve slavery. All of the resolutions supporting secession, justifying secession, talk only about slavery issues. There's nothing there about states' rights, about tariffs. It's all complaints about slavery and the threat of abolition coming from the North. So, one, you can look at the South's own language in the resolutions of secession. Number two, you can look at public speakers such as Vice President Alexander Stephens saying slavery was the cornerstone of the Confederacy, criticizing Jefferson and the Founding Fathers for saying that all men are created equal. The Confederate Constitution had special provisions to preserve slavery, but most interesting, it kept a supremacy clause saying that if there's a dispute between laws of the Confederacy and the laws of an individual state, the Confederate law prevailed. And again and again, I see little indications of it wasn't really about states' rights, looking at the rights of all the states, but it was more slavery-driven. In addition, there are demographics that support that conclusion. The only states seceded were slave states, 11 out of the 15 slave states, and probably not coincidentally, the first 7 states out were the Deep South states, including Florida, and those states had a slave population of 47% of the population, and 37% of the families in those states owned slaves. Now, the next 4 states that came out that seceded after Fort Sumter had slave population of only 29%, and 25% of their families owned slaves. There were 4 slave states that never seceded. They were Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri. And those states only had 14% slave population, and only 16% of the families owned slaves. So there's a demographic evidence supporting the fact that slavery was very much related to the issue of secession and the formation of the Confederacy.
Okay, now let me ask you.
And many others. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Okay, based on that, why do you think that there's such a myth now that slavery wasn't the cause? If you turn on any television show now, you see it still being debated, kind of like global warming and all that other stuff. Certain things seem to keep being debated regardless of historical fact or whatever. So not that I'm comparing the two, I'm just saying there's a lot of debating over what some people consider really proven already. Why is that?
I agree. And that's why individuals need to go back and look at the history and draw their own informed conclusions. And what I've done in this book is basically wiped out 150 years of argument and debate and just tried to go back to the beginning, look at the evidence at that time, such as the resolution, such as the population figures, such as the Confederate Constitution, etc. The reason why there's such a strong feeling that it may have to do with states' rights is that as the Confederacy was going down the tubes, in late 1864, the creation of the myth started. So you had Alexander Stevenson saying, oh, it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights, and about my speech, I was misquoted. I was misquoted on the cornerstone of the Confederacy. Let me tell you, it was one of the most misquotes ever, and it appeared in several different newspapers. So very quickly after the war, Jefferson Davis, Alexander Stephens, mediocre Confederate General Jubal Early, incompetent Federal General William Nelson Templeton, all started creating a justification for the Civil War.
Well, let's get back.
It's not a good justification.
Excellent point. Let's get back to this in our next segment. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
And this is the American Roundtable on Tough TV. We're here with Ed Bonekempter, the myth of the lost cause, why the South fought the Civil War and why the North won. And we'll talk a little bit more with you in just a moment.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
So happy to be here on Tough TV with Ed Bonekempter, the myth of the lost cause, why the South fought the Civil War and why the North won. Why did the North win, Ed, according to you?
Well, I would say the North won because the South misplayed its hand. It controlled the cotton market of the world at the beginning of the war and held it close to its own vest instead of trading, getting a lot of assets, getting commerce going to buy more arms, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the Confederacy under Lee was way too aggressive, and it was outnumbered 3.5 to 1, white men of fighting age, and by attacking strategically and tactically, it decimated its own forces. Also, a major mistake that was made by the Confederacy was to fail to use slaves as soldiers to fight for Confederate independence, and there was never an effort made to do that. So the South could have won the war, but it misplayed its hand. The North was very persistent, and in Ulysses Grant found itself a great general who was very successful throughout the war. And I need to add right here that in the course of the war, he commanded one army, one theater, took 209,000 casualties. Grant commanded 5 armies, 3 theaters, was a winner everywhere, and did all of that with only 154,000 casualties, 55,000 less than Lee. So you get the sense of what I'm saying is that the war was not fought wisely by the Confederacy.
I guess if it would have been fought more wisely, I guess they would have won. But there were opportunities missed.
Yes.
And I will turn it to you. What are your thoughts about this book?
I have a particular question for you, Ed. As we look at our life today, and that's what we're living in today, do you draw conclusions from in your book to the situation we're in today, where now we have a president, of course, looking back in history, Abraham Lincoln was credited with ending slavery. Do you think now that we have an African-American president and now they're wanting to take away our guns, does that have any indication or any reality for today?
Well, I really don't focus on the implications today. What I do is I try to set forth what I think actually happened 1860 to 1865, secession and the war, and let readers draw their own conclusions about what does this mean for us today.
And we'll be right back with Ed. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel.
So happy to be here on Tough TV. We have Ed Bonekempter. He is an author of The Myth of the Lost Cause, Why the South Fought the Civil War, and Why the North Won. Some final thoughts, Ed, on what we have discussed today.
Okay, I think that what we've discussed has been that it is important for us today to try to understand why there was secession, why there was a Confederacy, and how the Civil War was fought, so that we can more intelligently discuss those issues on a firm historical, evidentiary basis, and not just buy into what authors are saying, including myself, what people are saying. I just urge people to maintain a great interest in history and make their own decisions after they've read about multiple sides of important issues.
Do you think that we've lost that ability in many ways to look at our history in a non-partisan way?
I'm afraid we have that. There are too many people who just want to make a current or modern day political point, and so they will just say something and without having a firm historical basis for what they're saying. And I just think we need to pay more attention to the historical evidence rather than to political views in today's world.
I agree with that, and I think we need more of this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Ed, one of the things we've heard so many people are dropping out of the parties today because they feel like they've lost their direction, whether it be Republicans, Democrats, or the independent party even. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do think that parties have become so used to just pronouncing their own doctrines and repeating them, so that eventually you're supposed to believe what they're saying. But when multiple sides are doing the same thing, people end up being confused,
Yes.
and they just want to drop out.
Well, Ed Bonekempter, we've run out of time. Thank you so much. The Myth of the Lost Cause, Why the South Fought the Civil War and Why the North Won, available at Amazon and your favorite bookstore. I'm Al Spry.
And I'm Ken Meixel. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Al,
And
Ken, it's been a pleasure.
thanks for joining us on the American Roundtable here on Tough TV. We'll see you next time. to it, though. You know, they have a reaction now.
Oh yeah.
So if you sprinkle a little in, I think